by the time you get back.
Have you given any further thought to coming to work with me?
How are you feeling?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
Any changes?
Not really.
Are you sleeping? Nick?
Yeah, no, I'm sleeping, not through the night or anything, but I get sleep.
Would you like to try Ambien again?
No, thanks. I'm working on it, on sleeping better.
You need to sleep.
I do sleep.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean,
What?
I've been having dreams.
What kind of dreams?
The kind that kind of make me not want to sleep.
Like nightmares?
Like, pretty much nightmares, yes.
Do you want to talk about them?
Not really. But
Okay, I understand.
it's not that I don't want to talk about them, it's just I'm not particularly interested in them one way or the other. I mean, I don't like that they interfere with my sleep, but I don't know, maybe I'm getting used to them. Do you want to talk about them?
Well, we can either continue hypnotherapy or we can talk about your dreams. It's up to you.
Do you have a preference?
No.
Could you pick?
I can, yes.
Okay.
Okay then, let's talk about your dreams this week, if that's okay.
That's fine.
We can continue hypnotherapy afterward, or next week.
Sounds good.
Okay, so tell me about the last dream you remember. Nick?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to remember. It was the night before last. I woke up because I heard a sound.
What kind of sound?
It was kind of a low thumping. It was coming from the basement. It sounded like a dog or something, like maybe a raccoon banging its head against the patio door.
Okay.
I was in bed, wavering between waking and sleep, not sure if I was dreaming or if the sound was real.
Right.
Then I heard it again and thought I recognized it. It sounded like somebody was trying to open the patio door. I don't have a gun, and I hadn't set the alarm because one of the sensors needed a battery. My phone was charging on my desk in my office downstairs. I had nothing. I held my breath, waiting, hoping that the sound wasn't going to return, but it happened again. Thump, thump.
That sounds like it would be unnerving.
Yeah, it was.
What did you do next?
I got up, and I'm pretty sure I got up. I suppose there's a chance that I was dreaming, but I think that it was real. I'm sure that it was real.
Okay.
I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and, walking as quietly as possible, I made my way downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
I stood in the doorway outside of the large living area that I'd turned into my office. The patio doors were directly across the room, and that's when I heard it again. And I thought I could see something moving outside through the curtains, like a shadow, a man-shaped shadow.
Nick, are you...
I just stood there. I was frozen in place. I couldn't move. That's when the sliding door opened. That's when it entered my house. It was a shadow thing, darker than it should have been. I didn't know if it was human. I think it wasn't, but it appeared to be human. I thought of it as something that was temporarily taking a human form, a dark form, a man-shaped black hole in the fabric of the world, a hole leading to a universe of darkness, emptiness, death. I just stood there, frozen, watching the thing move around the outside of the room. I couldn't see its eyes, but I knew that it was staring at me while it moved somehow. I could feel it. It was painful against my skin, which felt cold and stretched suddenly. Then it lunged forward and knocked me over. And when I turned to look to see where it had gone, it had just vanished.
There was nothing there?
Nothing.
Okay.
So the next morning I set up 2 cameras.
Wait, the next morning in the dream?
Yes, in the dream.
Why the cameras?
I wanted to see what was really happening.
Okay, but why 2 cameras?
I put one in my bedroom to see if I was sleepwalking.
Sleepwalking in your dream?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I put the second camera downstairs facing the patio doors and went to sleep.
Okay, what happened next?
The same thing. I woke up, heard the noise, moved downstairs, and saw the shadow thing. But this time, I was attacked.
By the shadow?
Yes. It crawled across the room, looking up at me. Its face, if it even had a face, was unreadable. It was impossible for me to bring it into focus as I stared at it, crawling across the floor toward me. It jumped forward into me, knocking me back, and as it contacted my skin, I fell back into a void, and then I woke up in my bed, sweating.
Are you still in the dream, Nick?
I got up and turned on the lights. It was morning, but it was still dark outside.
The cameras?
I pressed play on both clips, side by side, and watched. The camera in my bedroom clearly showed me waking up and leaving the room. The other camera that was downstairs,
Yes.
it showed something else.
What?
Well, it showed the figure entering through the sliding door.
And
It also showed a second figure entering the room from upstairs.
the second figure was you, right? Nick?
I'm the person entering from the sliding doors downstairs. The figure entering from upstairs that left my bedroom wasn't me.
Who was it?
It was the dark figure.
Did you recognize it this time?
Not exactly, but I knew what it was.
What was it?
It was the end of everything. It turned and said something that I heard as a whisper in my head.
What did it say?
It said, "Find the horn." And that's when I woke up, for real, freezing cold. I went downstairs and found my screen door was wide open. scary dream, of course, but not nearly as terrifying as going downstairs right after having that dream to discover my sliding door was wide open. I checked everywhere, but there was no one in my house, and it didn't appear that anything had been touched or taken. It was just the sliding door. I tried to convince myself that it must have been the cold, the fact that I must have subconsciously understood that the sliding door was open, that I'd left it open after letting my dog out to go to the bathroom that resulted in the dream, rather than imagining the reverse was possible, that somehow, some part of that terrifying dream had been real. My therapist agreed that it was almost certainly the former, and that the best thing I could do would be to focus on getting enough sleep. But there was something I didn't tell her. The morning after I had that dream, I remembered something that happened just before I'd gone to bed the night before. I remembered my dog had dropped her toy on the way outside, and it got stuck when I tried closing the sliding door after letting her back in. I remember, very clearly, bending down, picking up her little blue stuffed animal toy, closing, and definitely locking the sliding door. Pacifica, tape number 1. I'm feeling pretty good. I got 6 almost uninterrupted hours of sleep last night. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm heading out into the woods for my first scheduled 22-minute session. Let the games begin. I've been tasked with collecting samples, soil, earthworms, and fern samples to be specific. Cameron Ellis told me that this monitoring is an essential part of tracking the expansion of the breach. I'm not stuck outside of Pacifica Station this time. On the contrary, I've been granted full access. Per usual, however, I'm only actually allowed 22 minutes at a time outside of the station while working up here. I asked Ellis how he was sure that Tanis, or the breach, was expanding, how they figured that out. He said that they drew a kind of line. He told me to imagine a doctor in a crowded hospital looking at an infected wound. The doctor might look at the red skin surrounding the wound, red skin that, along with the fever, indicated there was infection present. The doctor would then draw a dotted line around the infected area. If the infection spread beyond that dotted line, the patient would have to come back to the hospital for treatment. Otherwise, the patient could go home and rest, and take antibiotics, of course. I told Ellis that I understood the metaphor. He remarked that it wasn't a metaphor. It was an analogy. I didn't quite understand what he meant at the time, but I believe I get it now. I believe Ellis was intimating that Tanis as an infection doesn't make sense metaphorically, but there was something that did make sense. What if mankind was the infection, and Tanis was the cure? It's time for an update, a kind of internal Tanis State of the Union. Since everything that happened at the end of Season 2, I've spent countless days and nights working my way back over everything, trying to follow old leads from Lyle Stevick to Professor Adams, from Mike the Geologist to the Manson girl-esque troupe from the Cult of Tanis. In a lot of ways, it feels like I'm spinning around, blindfolded, holding out my arms, trying to touch something, anything. I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Corey, the way he was before and the way he was now. I asked MK what she thought. I was surprised by her answer.
What if he's a Tanis zombie?
What?
Remember the feet washing up on the shore of the Pacific Northwest?
Of course, I remember the feet.
The DNA that matched that one guy, the guy with the 2 feet?
Peter Chenoweth?
No, he killed himself.
Right. It was Alan Malden.
What if this new Marcus Corey is some kind of double like Malden? What if all that's left of the original Marcus Corey, the guy you saw rip open his ribcage, is just a foot in an old Reebok?
Wow.
Don't tell me you haven't thought about this.
Okay, first of all, I don't think Alan Malden is some kind of double.
Come on, really?
I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation for why he has 2 feet.
Yeah, there is. You're just not willing to consider it.
I'm surprised that you, of all people, believe this stuff.
DNA test.
I don't think I'm going to be able to get Marcus Corey to agree to a DNA test just because you think he's a Tanis zombie.
Get me some DNA, a coffee cup, Kleenex. A swab would be ideal, though.
He's not a zombie.
What if a Tanis zombie is kind of like a reverse zombie? So instead of being gross and undead, they're just smarter and more alive. That totally makes sense.
There's no such thing as a Tanis zombie.
Well, agree to disagree.
Well, zombie or not, and spoiler alert, I'm leaning heavily toward definitely not a zombie. I wanted to speak with Marcus Corey about what he was looking for, what kind of Tanis-related artifacts. While I was waiting for an appointment with Corey, MK called me back. Hey, what's up?
Call to Tanis Paul.
What about him?
He's out.
He escaped?
No, they let him go.
Why?
Somebody else confessed to the murder of Nathaniel Carter.
Who?
That Manson chick, Arcadia.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
sure thing.
So, Cult of Tanis Paul was free. I wasn't quite sure how to feel about this new development. His was the last face I remember seeing in the woods during the extreme craziness at the end of last season. If there's anyone out there who has answers about what went on that night, it might be Paul. Marcus Corey's assistant called and set up a meeting in the basement of Tesla Nova. Thanks for taking the time to meet with me.
Oh, no trouble at all. Do you mind if I work while we talk?
Not at all.
What is it you're interested in learning about what we're doing here? Go ahead, ask me anything.
Okay, well, I understand that you spent a significant amount of time in the breach.
I did, yes.
I was wondering if, while you were in there, you
Heard and felt strange things?
kinda, yeah.
Yes. A whole lot of things I'm not sure I'll ever be able to explain.
Right.
We have a lot in common, I imagine.
Yeah, I imagine we probably do. I'm not sure that everything that happened to me out there was actually real.
You know, I've listened to your podcast.
You have?
Yeah. It's a long drive to work.
Right. So, what do you think?
I think it's very entertaining.
Thanks.
Sure.
While I was out there in the woods, I was following clues from a couple of ancient texts, one called the Voynich manuscript and the Poeticon Astronomicon.
I know. I mean, I heard.
Right. Well, at the time when I was out there, tired and stressed and feeling not quite myself,
Yeah.
Now it all seems kind of ridiculous.
But it didn't out there in the forest.
No. And that's just it. I was following clues that I felt made sense. Certain star clusters and groups of... I was following references to the Holy Grail. Marcus?
What if those clues, the Voynich manuscript and the Poeticon Astronomicon, were just the breach's way of communicating? Of speaking to you in a language that you can understand, the language of myth.
Okay.
There's so much that we don't understand about language. There are certain Well, there are ancient guides and totems, things that hold power and meaning. They can point you in the direction if you're willing to follow, but once you get there, you have to access what's within your... You need to find a way to engage the breach.
Do you think that's what happened to me? You think maybe... You think I just engaged the breach?
Maybe.
Is that what happened to you?
It's different for all of us, Nick.
All of us? What all of us? Who?
How are you finding Pacifica Station?
It's peaceful. I mean, there's hardly ever anyone else there.
It's an important facility.
What can you tell me about Parzavella?
Well, Nathaniel Carter ran their Western operations for years. They reported dissection. They've been defunct, but there may have been something unauthorized going on in the warehouse you discovered, which has since burned down.
How do you know it was unauthorized?
What do you mean?
Well, you said it was unauthorized, and I was just wondering how you knew that.
Well, I'm assuming. As far as anybody here knows, they've been shuttered since the 80s or 90s when they were placing ads on bulletin boards.
They didn't have the deep web in the 80s.
Look, I'm not trying to be purposely vague, I promise.
Okay.
But deep insight into the history of Parzavella is above my pay grade, I'm afraid.
You said that Parzavella reported dissection, not Tesla Nova.
As far as I know, yes, but again, I'm no expert.
Okay, just one more Parzavella related thing, I promise.
Okay?
Apparently, Parzavella was interested in one particular artifact, something that might be related to your explorations.
You mean the horn?
Yes. Or tooth. How did you know about that?
You mentioned it earlier.
Did I?
Yes.
Right. Okay, well, is there anything you can tell me about that artifact? Maybe point me in the right direction?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know anything about that horn or tooth specifically.
No?
No, but I do have an idea where you might want to start looking.
Where?
Here.
What's this?
The True and Natural History of Eld Fen.
Eld Fen? Really?
It's a very cool book, actually.
So's the Dunwich Horror, but that's not going to help me understand what's happening here.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
You've heard the phrase, know your enemy?
Yeah, I've read The Art of War. Some of it, anyway.
It's a great book. You should finish it and then read The True and Natural History of Eld Fen.
Okay, are you saying that the cult of Tanis is my enemy?
No, I'm saying that the cult of Tanis is humankind's enemy.
Wow.
They say Hitler and the Nazis expended a great deal of time, money, and energy looking for artifacts before and during World War II.
Sure, I mean, I believe that's all been well documented.
Absolutely, but there are some occult items less well established in popular culture than the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Items a special arm of the Ananurba spent a considerable amount of time and money investigating.
Isn't the Ananurba just another name for the Thule Society?
No, they're separate, as is the Vril Society.
Okay, so where did you get it?
I got it from the library in Pacifica Station.
What do Eld Fen and Nazis have to do with Tanis or the Horn?
This book came from Hitler's bunker.
This was Hitler's book?
Himmler, allegedly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a piece of history. Dark history.
And I can borrow it?
Yes. I'd like to hear what you think.
It sounded like Marcus Corey was about to reveal a mysterious truth behind the ancient myth of Eld Fen, which perhaps he was, in some way, but all he did at that moment was hand me an actual physical book titled The True and Natural History of Eld Fen. There was no author listed, It was published by F.T. Neely. The book was unsettling. Holding a book with such an allegedly dark historical provenance was creepy, for lack of a better term. The possibility that the book may have been connected to something that the Nazis were looking for just added to the weirdness. The content of the book was somewhat familiar. Fen familiar. There were symbols stamped on the first page of the book, Nazi symbols that I'd seen a few times before. These weren't related to the publisher. They appeared to be library markers of some kind. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe this thing actually did come from Nazi Germany.
I'm an idiot. It was just on my side.
Inside, the book looked like any other from that period. It was a thin volume with 10 chapters, but I couldn't get a sense if it was supposed to be fiction or non-fiction. The tone and content of the book was similar to the tone and content of the John Corriman and August Wick material. I'm planning on featuring some of that material on this podcast once I read the entire book. Shortly after my visit with Marcus Corey, I received a call from Marshall Atkins. He'd been to visit his storage locker, and he'd brought back items belonging to Carl Van Sant. He told me that he was willing to take photographs and email them, but I really wanted to see everything myself, in person. Hey everyone, it's Nick. I'm talking to you now because my cousin Terry Miles has written a book. It's called Rabbits, and it's coming out June 8th. It's being published by one of my favorite imprints in the world, Del Rey. If you enjoy any of the podcasts we've created over the years, you're really going to dig this book. It's not an adaptation of the first season of Rabbits, it's a proper standalone novel. You can find Rabbits wherever books are sold, or check terrymiles.com for more information. Thank you so much for all of the support over the years. It means a lot. Check the Rabbits podcast feed for a 3-episode miniseries called The Path, a Rabbit Story. And remember, if you're interested in the Rabbits novel, you can find it anywhere books are sold or visit terrymiles.com for more information. Thanks so much for taking the time out to see me.
It's no problem at all. Alright, this is everything.
Wow. And Jeff didn't want any of this stuff?
I have no idea.
No?
No, I haven't seen or spoken with Jeff since after Carl died.
Right. Hey, is this old laptop Carl's?
Think so.
But
But what?
Carl wasn't legally allowed to use computers, right?
No, that's the first I've heard of that.
What?
Really?
We played online.
It's just right here.
Well, that doesn't make
Okay.
sense.
What makes you say that Carl couldn't use computers?
Well, it's just a little piece of wire.
Just that he'd been arrested for hacking.
Carl.
Yeah.
Like computer hacking?
Yeah.
Good idea.
Are you on drugs?
No, what do you mean?
Carl.
Yeah,
Carl was as much of a hacker as I am.
what do you mean?
Carl was a soldier.
Sure, but the two aren't mutually exclusive.
Carl was not a hacker.
There's a lot of photographs here. Where was this one taken?
That one there is from a fly fishing trip up in British Columbia.
It looks beautiful up there.
It's a great spot. You know, I think that's the last time I actually saw Jeff.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
He looks happy. Did he actually catch that fish?
What do you mean?
I mean, the huge fish he's holding. Did he actually catch that? Or?
Oh, Carl caught that fish.
Right. And Jeff's just holding it up?
No.
What do you mean?
That's Carl holding that fish.
No, that's... What? That's...
Look, I don't know much in this life, but I know Carl Van Sant. And that's definitely Carl holding the fish between me and his brother.
According to Marshall Atkins, the person I know as Jeff Van Sant is actually his dead brother, Carl. It's Tanis. I'm Nick Silver. We'll be back again soon. Until then, keep looking. Tanis is supported by you, our listeners. You can support Tanis monthly on Patreon at patreon.com/TanisPodcast. That's patreon.com/TanisPodcast. Or visit TanisPodcast.com and click on Support the Show in the top right corner. Also, if you enjoy Tanis, please rate and especially review on iTunes or wherever you found us. Reviews are key to keeping Tanis on the charts, where people can find our show. Thank you so much for listening. We couldn't make Tanis without you. If you enjoy Tanis, we promise you're going to love rabbits. One iTunes listener described rabbits as Ready Player One meets Serial meets the television show Lost. Subscribe to Rabbits right now at itunes.com/rabbits or visit rabbitspodcast.com. Rabbits. It's television for your ears. Tanis is a Public Radio Alliance and Minnow Beats Whale production. Produced by Terry Miles. Produced, mixed, and edited by me, Nick Silver. Additional fact-checking and moral support by Hollis Adams Lane. If you enjoy Tanis, you'll love the Black Tapes at theblacktapespodcast.com. For legal and safety reasons, we've elected to change some names and leave others out entirely. We don't do this very often, but we're not willing to compromise people's safety for any reason. Thanks again for listening to Tanis. You can support Tanis on Patreon at patreon.com/TanisPodcast. That's patreon.com/TanisPodcast. We make Tanis available for free, but it's definitely not free for us to make. We love doing it, but it's an expensive show to produce, and our sponsorship advertising doesn't cover half the cost of production. So we're asking for your support. By supporting Tanis on Patreon, you'll get access to exclusive audio and visual content, and it means we get to keep doing what we love to do at the Public Radio Alliance, which is creating television for your ears. Visit patreon.com/TanisPodcast for more information. If you enjoy Tanis, we promise you're going to love rabbits. One iTunes listener described rabbits as Ready Player One meets Serial meets the television show Lost. Subscribe to Rabbits right now or visit rabbitspodcast.com. Rabbits. It's television for your ears. Driving home through the darkness.
The seeker enters a nightmare world, an unimaginable hell of their own creation.
Is she really the one?
Tanis. I thought you said tennis.
This book ushers in the beginning of the period of the king.
Pretend to play games as you lay on the stage in him.
The stuff you're looking for might be pre-digital.
I have no idea what I'm looking for. And you barely remember the song.
Seeking Tanis, runner available.
The covenant that has now been set aside.
So rocket on the highway, on the road. From the Public Radio Alliance in Minnow Beats Whale, it's Tanis. I'm Nick Silver. We're telling the story of Tanis in order every 2 weeks. So if you're new to Tanis, you should go back and start at the beginning. We'll try not to get too far ahead by the time you get back.
Have you given any further thought to coming to work?
Pacifica tape number 2. It's 11:30 a.m. and I'm just about to re-enter the station after my second 22-minute block of the day. I spent the first block of the morning tracking the expansion of the breach by collecting samples. I'm not exactly sure what my collecting dirt, worms, and plants is telling them about breach expansion, but Cameron Ellis assured me that I'd have more access this time, so I'm going to take advantage of that access and ask him exactly how these samples help them monitor and track changes in the expansion of the breach. Continuing on the subject of access, Ellis appears to have kept his word so far. I've been doing a lot of exploring around Pacifica Station. From everything I've been able to glean about the station, the first building, a red brick structure now connected to the main building by a long, thick glass hallway, was built in 1947 by Arthur Collingwood. The main building, what I think of when I picture Pacifica Station, is an enormous, brutalist mid-century slab of concrete and glass that was added about a decade later. Pacifica Station is far bigger than I initially thought. Right now, it's time for an update, another kind of internal Tanis State of the Union. Since everything that happened at the end of our last episode, I've been spending a lot of time considering Jeff and Carl Van Sant, and the revelation that Jeff is actually Carl. I'm still not really used to the idea. I'm finding it hard to think of Jeff as Carl. Really hard. If your mind works anything like mine, I know what you're probably thinking. What you've probably been thinking since the end of our last episode. The ex-wife. If we're going to find Carl Van Sant, we're going to need to find his ex-wife. And that's just what we did. Well, to be fair, she actually found us. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me.
Yeah, it's fine.
And you're sure it's okay if I record your voice?
Yeah, it's okay. What? What do you mean? Why don't you just talk to them?
Is Jeff there?
Jeff's dead.
Sorry, I mean, is Carl there?
Hey, buddy.
Hey.
How are things? You can keep calling me Jeff if it's easier.
That doesn't seem right.
No, really, it's cool. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, well, I kind of do.
Okay.
The morning after I received that call from Cindy Van Sant, Carl and I sat down and talked. A lot. He asked me not to record him, but he did eventually agree to let me talk about almost everything we discussed. We went through what had happened with Jeff. Carl told me that Jeff didn't actually hang himself, but that he was just dead when Carl found him. They called it natural causes, but Carl believes his brother was murdered. He's not sure who did it, but he suspects everyone, which is what led him to switch places with his brother, which, in actual fact, was a process Jeff and Carl had actually initiated before Jeff's death. Things are probably going to get confusing for a bit. Jeff, the Jeff I've known for about a year and a half, is now Carl. Jeff, the real Jeff, was a very serious white or gray hat computer expert. Jeff had been looking into everything connected to Tanis, into Tesla Nova, Parzavella and their programs, Professor Adams, this podcast, and pretty much everything else. According to Carl, Jeff was also mentally and emotionally unstable and had been this way since he returned from Russia. From what Carl told me and MK was able to confirm, Jeff, once again the real Jeff, the person who died, was able to affect the internet at what MK referred to as the root or first level, something only a handful of human beings in the world had the ability to do. She was really impressed when she found out who Jeff Van Sant really was. If he had still been alive, I'm convinced she would have asked him for an autograph. I went over everything that had happened with Carl and Jeff, the tapes, the radios, the Vincent Pardo stuff, and Carl had an answer for everything. His agenda, it appeared, at least as far as I was concerned, was to get close to me to find out what had happened to his brother. To find out what was happening in the area Cameron Ellis refers to as the breach. Carl and I spoke for hours, and I asked him about everything that had happened while he was pretending to be his brother, about Jeff's death, the tapes, and all the rest of it. Like I mentioned before, Jeff, the real Jeff, was a computer expert, what MK referred to as
a fucking maestro.
Yeah?
Fuck yeah. Holy shit, I still can't believe that Jeff Van Sant was GM.
Yeah, apparently.
He was the best of the best of the best.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What does GM stand for?
God in the machine.
Right, of course.
He's the reason I called myself MK.
2 letters.
Yeah, obviously.
Right.
GM is a legend. Was a legend. Shit. He's gone.
She hung up shortly after this. MK was genuinely emotional. The loss of GM, the hacking legend known as God in the Machine, appeared to affect her more than she'd been expecting. I spoke to MK again a few hours later about something else, and she reiterated that GM was the best of them, a legend, and that if anybody could delete or alter something at the root level of the internet, it was GM. I talked to her about everything Jeff had told me, about Carl's suicide by hanging, not true, it was natural causes, allegedly, about Carl's age, turns out he was much closer in age to Jeff, or vice versa, It was still sometimes hard for me to remember that Jeff is Carl. I had so many questions, and I was going to have an opportunity to ask all of them. One of the big ones was, did Cameron Ellis know Carl was Jeff? It appeared so based on his tip to me about Marshall Atkins, but MK wasn't able to confirm a connection. So I went directly to the source.
Yes, I eventually figured out that Carl was pretending to be his brother.
You knew that when you bought all of Carl's or Jeff's tapes and radios?
No, I figured it out sometime after that.
When?
I understand this must be frustrating.
Yeah, that's one word for it. Another might be infuriating.
I understand.
Yeah?
Is there anything in particular you'd like me to share about Jeff and Carl Van Sant?
Yeah. How about everything?
I can't send you those files, you understand?
So why offer?
Because I can allow you temporary supervised access to everything you're looking for in a clean room at Tesla Nova.
Hey everyone, it's Nick. I'm talking to you now because my cousin Terry Miles has written a book. It's called Rabbits, and it's coming out June 8th. It's being published by one of my favorite imprints in the world, Del Rey. If you enjoy any of the podcasts we've created over the years, you're really going to dig this book. It's not an adaptation of the first season of Rabbits, it's a proper standalone novel. You can find Rabbits wherever books are sold, or check terrymiles.com for more information. Thank you so much for all of the support over the years. It means a lot. Check the Rabbits podcast feed for a 3-episode miniseries called The Path, a Rabbit Story. And remember, if you're interested in the Rabbits novel, you can find it anywhere books are sold or visit terrymiles.com for more information. Those files at Tesla Nova did cover a lot, but they provided very little in the way of new information about the Van Sant brothers, and any possible connection to me or Tanis. Jeff, the actual Jeff, had spent a lot of time in Russia, but there wasn't much in the way of information on what he was doing there or who he was working for. That avenue of the investigation appeared to be the most important aspect to Tesla Nova. There were hundreds of pages of transcripts of Carl's, or now Jeff's, tapes, but Tesla Nova's analysis indicated that there wasn't anything there, or at least they hadn't uncovered anything yet. They were still only halfway through the transcription process. There were an awful lot of tapes. There were other things in those files. Things that I was eventually able to ask Carl about, including the post office box key stuff, why did he keep feeding me clues, and why was he so interested in following my investigation into Tanis. Once again, he eventually agreed to do his best to tell me everything I wanted to know. But this time he insisted that we do it, you guessed it, over a beer.
So, what do you want to know?
I want to know everything.
I'll do my best. Okay, well...
Why keep feeding me clues? Like the post office box key, Charles Fort, and all the gray pancake stuff.
That was me genuinely trying to help you with your investigation.
Well, clearly you were capable of conducting your own investigation.
Yeah, sure I was, but I didn't have the connection you guys had to Tanis.
You guys?
You and Jeff.
Jeff was connected to Tanis? What do you mean?
I mean, he was obsessed with Tanis. He didn't really know what it was he was looking for a long time, I'm sure, but he definitely didn't know nearly as much as you know now at the time of his death. He was trying to find out if there were healing properties.
And Vincent Pardo?
Was a bit of a stalker. Not in a Tarkovskian sense, more like a fatal attraction type of thing, although Pardo was harmless.
And Jeff was trying to help him?
Yeah, but Pardo was losing it. He kept trying to pay, treating Tanis like a kind of cult, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And there were some developments with Pardo.
Like, what kind of developments?
Like, he and Jeff did spend time in the woods. Pardo did have cancer and then didn't, but...
But what?
Well, he didn't tell my brother this, but he'd stopped taking all of his prescription meds. Like, cold turkey. That guy was on a shitload of meds when he died.
Carl and I spoke for another few hours. I took him through everything from the beginning. Anytime I thought I'd caught him in a lie or some altered perspective version of the truth, Carl had an answer. When everything was finished, I wasn't much further ahead than I'd been before Jeff, now Carl, had disappeared. When I left him in the parking lot of that bar and got into my cab, Jeff Van Sant was gone. Really gone this time. But his brother Carl remained. As I rode home in that cab, I didn't know exactly what to think about Carl. I still don't.
Are you feeling relaxed?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. We're going to go back to where we left off last time. Nick?
Yes?
Where are you now?
In the Great Hall.
Are you alone? Nick?
No.
Who is with you?
My wife is here.
You're married?
Yes.
When did you get married?
2 years ago.
Where did you meet?
We were both working with the Taskers.
The Taskers.
Yes.
Who are they?
The Taskers are in charge of the dowsing and seeking tools.
You were looking for something?
Yes.
What were you looking for?
A door.
What door?
A door to the other place.
What other place? Nick? Nick. Can you tell me how long you've been there, working with the Taskers? Nick?
9 years. There was something in the material that Cameron Ellis allowed me to access in that Tesla Nova clean room. It was something I didn't realize was interesting until MK pointed it out. As soon as I'd finished in that clean room, I turned on my voice recorder and started narrating everything I could remember, stream of consciousness style. There were 2 words in that information dump recording that resulted in MK sending me a whole bunch of research material. 2 words in Latin. Those 2 words? Summum bonum. Connected via Skype, MK and I sat down and went over everything together. Summum bonum is a Latin expression which means the highest good. It was introduced by Cicero to represent the idea of the good in the philosophy of the ancient Greeks. The summum bonum is considered a terminal goal, an end unto itself. A good which is in itself good, but which also contains all other good.
Sounds like school.
Yeah, it kinda does.
I've filtered everything through my algorithm twice. It should be in your inbox in about 2 seconds.
Got it. Why send everything through your search algorithm twice? Wouldn't the results be the same?
No.
Why not?
It's adaptive.
Adaptive?
Yeah, you know what? You should probably just stick to wandering in the woods.
Okay, fair enough. What's this?
I can't see you, Nick.
Oh, right here.
Joachim Physius?
Yeah,
Who the fuck is Joachim Physius?
Robert Flood.
Who the fuck is Robert Flood?
Okay. Flood was an English Paracelsian physician. He was an astrologer, cosmologist, occultist, mathematician, among a bunch of other things.
He sounds like a riot.
Well, he was controversial.
Yeah, I'll bet. Is that like Kabbalah, like Madonna?
You-
I'm on Wikipedia.
Well, Kabbalah is complicated.
Yeah, Jewish mysticism.
Okay, that works as a baseline definition for our purposes, I suppose.
Sounds cool.
Well, it's definitely interesting.
So this guy was some kind of mystic,
Yeah,
and he wrote under a pseudonym.
sometimes.
But why?
Well, his beliefs were controversial. He wanted to get them out there, but I suppose he didn't want to stand behind all of them, at least not initially.
His beliefs were that controversial?
Well, at the time, definitely.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, Flood was a Rosicrucian believer, and he got into heated back and forth discussions about the nature of the universe with Johannes Kepler. The two would address each other in their work, actually.
What's a Rosicrucian? Some kind of cult thing?
Yeah, kind of.
Right, figures.
According to Flood, the Rosicrucians were real, but at that time opinion was divided as to whether or not they were, whether a secret community of alchemists known as the Rosicrucian Brotherhood actually existed.
Did they?
Well, it's generally accepted that the Brotherhood kind of existed, but after the fact.
What do you mean?
I mean, they were a legendary, most likely fictional order that people became drawn to, and therefore, eventually, they became real.
Weird.
Yeah, a couple of anonymous texts were published, and